you'll never get paid. We do actually kind of have an advantage of more information than some other healthcare offices, but we can't surprise them, and we can never ever say, we'll figure it out and send you a bill. You'll never get paid.
All dentists know the common career paths, but how do you know which path is right for you, and are there other options out there?
On this podcast, we will be chatting with industry experts. We want to bring you the knowledge and resources you need to take your career to the next level and break down those industry secrets interview by interview.
We are here to ignite a revolution in the dental landscape
and help you, the dentist, build the career you have always wanted.
I'm Dr. Cassidy Reeder.
I'm Carter Frank.
And welcome to the Revolution Dentistry Podcast.
I'm Carter Frank here with Dr. Cassidy Reeder. This is the Revolution Dentistry Podcast, where we help you with strategies to build lasting success for yourself and for your family. Today we have a very special guest, Sheri Jolly. Sheri Jolly is a dynamic leader in healthcare operations with a proven track record in enhancing operational efficiency and driving revenue growth. With her extensive background in customer service, marketing, and project management, Sheri brings a wealth of knowledge to the table. As a certified fraud examiner, she possesses a unique perspective on the financial impacts within healthcare, emphasizing the importance of safeguarding against fraud while optimizing revenue cycles. Sheri is passionate about fostering collaborative environments that empower teams to achieve their goals, and her acute attention to detail and problem-solving skills have consistently led to successful outcomes. Today, we'll dive into 3 critical operational deficits: uniformity, clarity, and simplicity, which can sabotage a practice's revenue cycle. Join us as we explore actionable insights and strategies to transform these challenges into opportunities for innovation and growth. Welcome to the podcast, Sheri. We're super excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. So to kick us off here, could you share with us what brought you to the dental industry a little bit, and how you managed to become so successful at practice operations?
Well, to be quite honest, I just got a grown-up job out of high school. So I did the kind of non-traditional where I kind of did college as I went. I didn't just leave high school and go to college. I worked. And my first non-food service job was the front desk at a dental office.
Oh, wow.
And so we were just thrown in. This was way back before the turn of the century, shall we say, where, we were actually doing things on ledger cards and scheduling in a actual paper schedule, and things like that. So we didn't take very much insurance at the time. It was mostly you sent the patient a bill and they paid it, which is completely different than how it works today. And so I just kind of started there, and the dentist that hired me, he just loved to teach, and he sat down and talked to me about everything. He drew a picture of a tooth, showed me what the names of the surfaces were, just all kinds of things like that. And then I just kind of moved on from that to being a dental assistant to, just kind of doing all the jobs. And then along the way, I finished my education and kind of moved into management from there. And so it's just always been the industry that I've worked in since I quit slinging fries, basically.
I started out in Dairy Queen, and here I am, a dentist. So we all kind of find our way from food service. I don't know what it is. Just kidding.
That's incredible. You started off as front desk, right? And now you're able to build up to helping multiple practices with their operations. I think that's very inspiring. So could you explain what you mean? I mentioned in the intro the 3 operational deficits, which were uniformity, clarity, and simplicity. Why do you view these as so crucial for a practice's revenue cycle?
Well, the revenue cycle is kind of it's always the question mark. There's I don't know what my insurance will pay. I don't know what my insurance is. The most unreliable source of information is your patient when it comes to their insurance. And so I like to give it the example of a tennis match where one person is being run all over the court. and the other person is standing still. Well, the standing still party is the insurance company. The running all over the court is the dental practice.
I love tennis, and I hate it when people do that.
Yeah, well, but that's kind of what they do. They're every time you think you've got something, they throw another something new at you, and you're running all over the place. And so what happens when there's an issue in the revenue is the dentist has nothing to do with it. He just says, go talk to the ladies up there. And the patient never blames their insurance company. It's always the person at the desk's fault when there's something wrong financially. And so I have found that if you create a protocol, no matter what the insurance is, and you create simplicity and you are extremely clear, you offer no surprises. You offer, I always say, if you don't know what the insurance is going to pay, you tell them the full fee. That type of thing. So if you do that and you create a procedure, you cut that stuff down. The other issue that I find in almost every business operation of a dental practice is that everyone in there is self-taught. Everyone in there figured it out themselves. And I am one of those people. I was also self-taught. I was one of those where they told me, just call the insurance company and figure it out. The doctor didn't have time for that. And so there is basically an entire generation of people in that capacity that didn't actually have training. It was trial and error, and they learned by negative feedback from their patient. That's, for the most part, that's how they learned. And so there's some things that are just, if we just implement those, you eliminate that. And another issue, we fill in gaps for dental offices. We fill in their administrative role gaps. But one of the reasons you have so many gaps is because the job is hard. It's a hard job, and people don't really love that job, and you don't keep them very long. So when we make the job clearer and uniform, and they know what they're supposed to do, and it's not a constant guessing game, you have happier staff and happier patients, which, it's office culture, it's pride in your job, it's longevity in your staff. These are all things that come from just uniformity, clarity, and just making it simple.
Of course. No, I really, really like what you're saying there. I feel like it's extraordinarily true that a lot of front office just get thrown into the deep end, and they're just told to figure it out. After, having been in the industry now for a few years, I am very impressed whenever I meet a front office individual who has all of this knowledge on lock, but there's so much more to it that they could constantly improve. And I think that's where someone like you can come in and help with that piece.
Well, one of the issues that I find quite often is because we told people to figure it out by insurance, they have made office and payment policies based on insurance payment policies and not the standard of care. Because insurance pays based on their payment policy, not necessarily the standard of care. So a great example is you might get a letter saying, we will not cover this. It's usually a perio treatment or a crown. And sometimes there's a sentence in there that says, this doesn't mean you shouldn't have it, just means it doesn't meet our criteria for payment. And what happens is that lady you told to figure it out, she's figuring out how to get this paid, and she's telling you, you can't do this because you're not going to get paid. And suddenly your focus is on the payment policies of the patient's insurance and not what the patient needs. And the patient's focus is also that as well. And that's because we did it backwards. We told them to go figure it out. They figured out how to get paid. And we didn't sit there and say, well, this policy isn't good for us. This policy isn't good for our patient. And we aren't pushing back on that. We aren't, as dentists, collectively pushing back, saying this policy, we will call you every 2 years and negotiate our fees, but we've never asked you to reconsider this policy. We've never asked you to reconsider that you shouldn't charge us to pay us with the EFT fees and things like that. These are not things that are being asked or pushed back with the insurance companies. It's only happening when the person creates the claim and sends the claim, they're trying to figure out how to get the claim paid. But if we had been more uniform and we had looked at it the way we would diagnose a patient and look at the whole situation, I think we would have a better environment.
Right.
Just in how this works. And we need to just turn this around and start dealing with it that way.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like you bring up a really, really great point. It seems like maybe they don't realize they're being taken advantage of sometimes, or maybe they don't realize that they can push back. Maybe they don't realize those different things.
Most of them don't realize they can push back. There's a lot of doctors that just accept the fees the insurance company gives them when they sign up. They didn't know they could negotiate. But there's no such thing as a contract that can't be negotiated.
Right.
So, and with that though, you should hire somebody who knows how to do it. Don't be your own banker, don't be your own lawyer, don't be your own plumber, because you don't want your patient to be their own dentist. Like if we value specialty training and specialty education, we should value it in the other aspects of our businesses and our lives as well.
We should understand our limitations, you know.
Yes,
and as dentists, that's especially important. Now, that leads me into our next question here. So we talked about uniformity. So implementing uniformity, how can a practice establish and maintain that uniformity in their procedures across different locations, team members? You know, what are some strategies for training staff effectively on that?
Well, one of the things that we find is when there's differences in procedure, I mean, everybody kind of has a general idea, but when there's differences in procedure, it's based on different insurance companies and how to work with those insurance companies. And again, this is one of those things where you'll end up spending more time on the patient's insurance than you ever spent with your patient. And so we just need to kind of make sure the patient understands, well, your insurance company did not provide this information. Not my staff stayed on the phone for an hour and a half to get the information on this code. There are some things where we have a 20-minute hold policy. We don't let anybody stay on hold for more than 20 minutes. So we have things like that. If it's not available online, we need it to be available online because they're not putting more reps to answer the phone. We need what they're taking away from us on the phone to be available online. And we need to ask for those things. But we also just need to have the same procedure per patient. So if we don't have the information, then we go with full fee. If they don't tell us that it's covered, we assume that it's not. And so that's a little bit harder because the patient will call and get the information. But if we treat it the same way, and one of the things that I always stress is get your information 48 hours in advance. And if your patient does not bring it until their appointment, that's a cash appointment. And that's that's very controversial when you're talking to your front desk staff because they don't want that negative feedback. They don't want to confront the person and say, okay, well, but you have one of those insurances that takes a long time to get the information, which means that you either sit in the chair and we don't really know what you have because you brought us a card. It might not even be your insurance, or your appointment runs late. Because we don't want you to sit in the chair till we know that you're actually covered. So one of the things that I have found it's very effective is if you tell the patient, hey, I don't have your insurance information, I don't have viable information ahead of time, and that we still may have your appointment, but this is what it's going to cost. It's a magical thing. They always find the information. So that is one uniform procedure that I always implement is that we never just if we don't have you verified at the 24-hour mark, which is why we ask for it at the 48-hour mark. If we don't have it verified at the 24-hour mark, we can still treat you because this is not a treatment-based issue. This is a coverage-based issue. And you'll just this is what the cost of that appointment will be today.
Wow.
And so that's one of the things that I get the most deer in the headlights when I introduce that to the staff. They're like, but so-and-so, but you can't surprise them at the desk. You have to call them ahead of time. And that's the other thing that is about the clarity. The surprising a patient with a cost while they're standing at the desk is the best way to get a bad Google review.
Oh, yeah.
So this is why you must tell them ahead of time, prepare them ahead of time. This is why when you don't have the information like when I say that, what I mean, their insurance company gives you negotiated fees for, 50 codes, but they didn't put the code you're using on that sheet. Then you're just going to go with your insurance pays 50% and our fee is this. So your insurance is going to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of this. Right. But you're responsible for the entire amount. And so we're not telling them that they have to pay the full fee, but we also are not surprising them with that. And so the good news is because we're in dentistry, they do actually provide us with more codes than some other healthcare arms. So we do actually kind of have an advantage of more information than some other healthcare offices, but we can't surprise them and we can never ever say, we'll figure it out and send you a bill.
Right.
You'll never
couldn't
get
agree
paid.
more. Those are great
Absolutely.
tips.
Absolutely. And digging deeper into that, you mentioned that the practice oftentimes spends more time on insurance rather than the patient. That could mean that the revenue cycle success is determined before the patient is even, sitting in the chair. Can you elaborate?
That's actually one of the things that I feel very strongly on. You already know if your revenue cycle is successful before they sit in the chair. You should know. You should have, if you are putting the information into your system in a uniform protocol, then it's never just one patient with one insurance. That plan might cover 600 people. So you have the information for 600 people now, if you put it in your system correctly. So you got to use your software correctly. But if you don't know this stuff, if the patient doesn't fully know what they could fully be responsible for before they sit in the chair, then there's a good chance that you're not going to get paid for the whole thing, that there's not going to be coverage. So doing the prep work ahead of time, which is the part that the office hates the most, because it is more of the running around the court. You have to ask this question and then ask that question and then ask the same question again a different way to get what you need. And so that's where I'm saying if they provide it, we'll give you the answer. If they don't provide it, we know what our fee is, but we don't spend our time running around the court. And we deal with every patient the same way, and every patient knows the price, and every patient has agreed to it. There's been maybe not a handshake, but I like to, metaphorically, there's been a handshake before we started the treatment. And so everybody knows everything. There's a signature, there's all of that stuff. And if that happens before the patient sits in the chair, so, they come in for their diagnosis, you make a treatment plan, everything is settled before they come in for the treatment, then you're going to have a more successful revenue cycle. And you're also going to cut your overhead, because when you don't do it before the appointment, you spend way more time after the appointment. And you're also then convincing the patient to put you higher on their priority list when the dentistry's already done. You go in the pile of bills, and you're at the bottom of that pile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
They're not necessarily planning to scam you, but you are at the bottom of that pile. You aren't the priority anymore.
So you would say one of the number one steps to take to ensure clarity would be to make sure that all the complicated stuff is handled before the patient even sits in the chair. Are there any other steps you would say are pretty crucial to ensure clarity in billing and insurance processes?
Well, training. So again, we talked about how so many people are self-taught, and they're taught, and I gave an example earlier of where they know the payment policy, but not necessarily the clinical policy. And this is where everybody needs training, because there are some things that it's not a sales. It always comes across a lot of times when I see this training, it's a sales training, but this really isn't a sales training. This is what you're covered, and this is what you need. They're not always the same. And then you didn't write their policy, so you just are flat out telling them that. But understanding what terms mean, what coverages mean, the rules of the insurance companies. Do you know how long they have to pay you once you send the claim? Do you know what that rule is? Because it's different from every state. There are some rules, like if you're in network and but it's not covered, there are some states where you can charge your full fee, and then there are some states that you can't, depending on what the service is. So there's a bunch of rules that are different by state, but there's also a bunch of protocols that the insurance company, I'll give you an example today, actually. One of my verifiers just said, I got something in writing from the insurance company saying x-rays were covered, and then they didn't cover the x-rays. And when I called them, the person on the phone said, oh, yeah, our information isn't accurate. You have to call and get it.
Oh, wow.
But that's the wrong answer, because when you call, there's an automated disclaimer that says this information is basically that it's not legally binding. That whatever they tell you verbally on the phone, it's not legally binding. But my inexperience, like, it's only been on staff for a month, she believed that now she has to call every time to find out if x-rays are, what does that do for our overhead? She's got maybe 20 minutes if she follows the 20-minute hold policy, or she has to wait till 8 a.m. and be the first caller in. That type of thing. And then what does that do? It increases our overhead, and it causes a problem with our patient.
Wow.
That's crazy.
But the right answer was no, you gave us in writing that this was covered.
Yeah, training.
And what you gave us in writing was coverage. And that also gives us something when they get negative feedback from their insurance company, they get the EOB, because hardly any patients read their EOBs, but the one who does is going to call you and ask you about it. And when they get it, you can show them the document you got from the insurance company. And so then it's not blaming the office anymore. They know that you were given bad information. So, these are sort of the things. Like, there are some things we don't need to put our staff in the line of fire for. And just because each insurance company does things differently doesn't mean we do.
Right.
And so and you think about it, like, if you're doing a filling, you do the same steps for every filling, right? You remove the decay, there's etch, bond, composite, maybe a matrix, all of that stuff. There are some patients that might take longer because they've got, like, maybe there's a saliva issue or something. Like, some patients take longer, but it's the same step every time. And for the most part, if you just follow that protocol, you get those instruments out, you have those materials in the operatory when you start, you're going to basically do the same thing every single time. Every once in a while, there's an anomaly, but it's going to be kind of the same thing every day. And when you start to kind of put the chaos in order at the beginning, and that's what you want your staff to be doing. You want them to kind of be putting the chaos in order at the beginning. Then we can talk to our staff, or talk to our patients, knowledgeably, and we can tell them more accurately. And we can tell them your insurance company doesn't provide this, or your insurance company does provide this, whichever it is. And then the patients know what to ask for when they buy, because that's the other part we have, is a bunch of uneducated buyers of insurance policies. They don't know what to buy. All they do is sign up at work for an insurance policy. They never ask, does it cover this? Does it cover that? In my whole almost 30 years, usually around open enrollment, I will get the over 65 crowd calling and asking, which one should I sign up for?
Wow.
One time I got an HR person that called and asked our office, what should we sign up for? And I said, well, here's the thing that disappoints patients at the dentist's office: waiting periods. Make sure you don't sign up for a plan with a waiting period. And then they knew, they went into that meeting knowing what to ask for. But if we don't educate the buyers of these plans, we'll never see a change in these plans.
So how do you recommend that we educate the buyers of the plans?
Well, I honestly think that we should talk about common disappointments that patients have. Like when their expectations are not met, we should talk about that. I have always said that dentist's office should put out a pamphlet or something every November when it comes to open enrollment. Like when you buy insurance, ask for this. Do you have waiting periods? Do you have exclusions? There's certain procedures that are only covered once in a while, and then there's certain procedures like one of them is like a gingivectomy with a filling, where you have to, and I might be using the wrong clinical term, but basically where you have to go below the gum line to do the filling.
Okay.
And the insurance company doesn't cover that part, just covers the filling, and they say it's part of the original service, but it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not every insurance company that does that, but there are plenty of them that do. And these are things that the patient has the expectation my insurance covers it. And they don't know that their insurance doesn't cover that. They really don't understand downgrades. Still, downgrades have been an issue for a long time. I remember very clearly sitting in a treatment coordinator desk, and the guy said, no, my insurance said I have 80% coverage. And we got their insurance company on the phone, and the insurance person on the phone said, yeah, you do have 80% coverage. And I said, wait a minute. You mean you're going to pay 80% of this code? He's like, oh no, we're going to do an alternative benefit. And I said, yeah, you have 80% of an amalgam. You do not have 80% of a filling. And then the patient's like, oh, and I said, so do you want us to put a silver filling in your mouth? And they're like, well, no. I said, so you don't have 80% coverage.
That's crazy.
You don't have and you know, when they
That's
say
so
that,
much time wasted for you.
Well,
You have to call
again,
the insurance.
more time on the insurance than we spend on the patient. And that's kind of what has been happening, is that even when you get your revenue cycle into a good KPI, your overhead goes up.
Right.
And so just because your reimbursement went up doesn't mean your overhead won't go up. And so that's a KPI that nobody manages, nobody looks at, nobody observes. It's how much time we are spending, because sometimes you need to be looking at your PPO contracts with how hard is this company to work with? And if this company is that hard to work with, do we need them? Because this company costs me this much more for a pro fee claim than this company, because I have to spend 3 staff hours getting it paid.
That's
So these are
interesting.
things that are absolutely never thought of on the front end. But because I'm in the weeds here, those are one of the things where I think, let's put a protocol in place. Let's prevent this. Let's just say we don't accept that.
Wow. I mean, there's so many components to it. I mean, hearing you talk, just one thing after the other is such a good point, you know, that a lot of dentists don't recognize, especially that KPI. I mean, it's never being measured, right? That's wild.
it's they wouldn't even know how to measure it. Now, I know that when you have, I've met with plenty of consultants, and I've done consulting myself, and they'll talk about how much money per hour your chair needs to generate, what the production per hour for a hygienist should be, and they only talk about what the clinical staff is doing, but that's not the real cost of that care. The cost of that care also involves your staff, and your staff will tell you, like in November when those patients call and ask what insurance to sign up for, the one with the easiest website is the one your staff will recommend. Almost every time. The one with the easiest to navigate website is the one your staff will recommend, because it makes their job easier. They actually can talk to the patient about it. They know what's going to happen. So you got to watch out that too. You've got to look overall. It's not just about individual fees, because if you've got a really nice crown reimbursement fee, but you have to appeal every crown buildup, like there's one insurance company that just basically auto denies every crown buildup, and your staff has to call and get it paid again.
Gosh.
But like I have one client who there's
Nightmare.
just like one page of outstanding claims, and I looked at her notes. I looked at my biller's notes. She's called 4 times on each claim. And it's always the crown buildup. They're all crown buildups.
Crazy.
There's things to do for that. You need to take intraoral photos. You need to give them the tools they can, but taking an intraoral photo is costs you a lot less than having your biller call 4 times.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So these are things that we don't understand in our cost, in our overhead. And we need to calculate that into our overhead. And we need to do a protocol that works for us, not necessarily for the insurance. Because again, if the patients go around and they find that multiple doctors find that this insurance company is too expensive to deal with, they'll go ask their employers to offer a different plan.
Yeah. I totally, yeah. I feel like, it comes down to also overcomplicating things. Like,
Absolutely.
I feel like, and that's one of your 3 deficits is simplicity. So like, what are the signs that a practice is overcomplicating the process? How can they streamline operations without sacrificing, quality of care?
One of the issues is there's only one person who really knows how to do anything.
Yeah, it's true.
And so what that means is, and that's usually because that person just kind of knows it all by heart. It's one of those quick study people who just memorizes everything. I'm one of those. But if you have only one person who can do most of this stuff, then what you have is a system that can't be duplicatable across a big staff. You have to have that one know-it-all person. And I don't mean know-it-all in a negative way. I just mean that one key person. And then that key person turns into being your bottleneck. Yeah. And your obstacle for growth. So when you just have only one person who can do the job, there's a problem with that job. So that's problem number 1. Number 2 is when they overload you with gadgets. I call it gadget overload. You'll have 7 different softwares to do one job. You don't need that many softwares. Most of the time, you have 2 or 3 that can do what you need to get done, and you bought these other ones, and they all overlap services. And depending on who you talk to at the front desk, they say, well, I use Wave for this, or I use this for that. And in the end, you can do it 12 different ways, but you shouldn't. And so really evaluate your technology, because making somebody learn a new software takes time. Making them learn 12 softwares is kind of ridiculous. But I've seen it. I've seen it quite a bit where they have too many things. They all do the same thing. And they're paying this monthly subscription. And then most of the time I'll be like, but your Open Dental can do that, right? And they'll be like, no. I was like, yeah, you just go here. Or Dentrix. Dentrix does a lot. And I'm just like, but just go into Dentrix and Dentrix will do this for you. And they've never even noticed
That's crazy.
that their insurance will do, or their software will do that for you. So that goes back to training and knowing what your software does. And the most common reason that a dentist doesn't pay for training is because of staff turnover. Because once they taught somebody how to do it, another person leaves and they have to start them over again.
Yeah.
Which again,
it's exhausting.
If we fix the job, we will have better results with our employees.
Yeah, better attention. Absolutely.
And then our money for training isn't wasted.
Right.
So digging deeper into the technology side, your second point, you definitely don't need 7 softwares for one job. That's crazy. Are there any specific tools or softwares you recommend to help simplify that process?
Well, I have my favorites. I certainly do. I think that there are some softwares that are better. I have a couple that I just won't take a client if they have them.
Oh no!
But there's a list of softwares that are like, no, this actually makes our job harder and it makes your accounting a nightmare.
Wow.
But there are some that I think are kind of top tier. I like CareStack and Open Dental. Those are my 2 favorites. I think Dentrix has kept up with the changes of the times, and I like the new upgrades that they have done, and I feel like they're kind of easy my favorite thing with Open Dental is it's easy to train people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can take anybody from anywhere and train them on Open Dental.
I've heard good
and
things.
teach them how
Yeah.
to be good at Open Dental. The other thing is that Open Dental plays well with others. And what I mean is when you have to, so none of them some of them come with their own claim software, but there's a couple third-party claim softwares that are better than the built-in services that come with software. And Open Dental plays well. Like they integrate well, the x-rays integrate better. And so that's one of the, but I am not on staff with that company or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
just the tool
Yeah.
I prefer. The clearinghouse I prefer is Vine. I like that. I think what I like about that feature is, again, it's easy to train a biller on how to use it. And it's easy to train somebody on how to find the issue. It's less steps and less clicks to go identify a problem claim and fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's honestly the ease of use for me. But there are lots of good, like if you don't have Vine, that doesn't mean I don't take you as a client, because there are some very good softwares out there.
Right.
It's just the least complicated, and it is effective, just as effective as its counterparts.
Would you be comfortable saying what maybe one of the more complicated softwares you've come across are?
No, I let me just say that if you cannot research a claim through your claim software with ease, you can't find that attachment. You have to go through 12 steps to get your attachment number.
Yeah.
Don't use it.
Right. No, it's
Like
simple
ask
enough.
that question, like how do I find the attachment number after a claim is sent? The insurance company says I didn't send an attachment. How do I find that? And if it's not, look up, put in the patient name and search, and the numbers attached to the claim, don't use that software.
That's a good
Right,
rule of thumb right there.
To our listeners, if you're hearing this and you're like, wait, my software doesn't let me do that, I think she's probably talking about your software. So it might be time to switch.
Sheri, this has been an absolutely spectacular episode. You have shared so many golden nuggets with us today, which I think are overlooked quite often. And I know that you know that because you see it across practices all over the country. So if someone wanted to, reach out to you and get some advice on revenue cycle management and streamline these processes for their practices, where could they reach you and how would they best do that?
Well, they can go to our website, which is dsepractice.com. There's a link that you can schedule an appointment for a consultation. So that's the easiest. Also, we're available by phone as well. It's a 614-915-0528. But the easiest way is to just reach out to us online at dsepractice.com.
Awesome. Well, Sheri, if you had to give one more piece of final advice to somebody out there who's a dentist who owns practices, I know you've already shared so many, but what would just be like your wrap up if you could put it in a bow?
Well, the wrap up is that just whenever you see complication, just remove the extra steps. Like just keep it simple. Again, just don't get run all over the court.
I'm a tennis player, and it's an unfair advantage when you're playing someone who is this far ahead of you in the game, and they're just kind of like running you around, and you're just trying to lob it back. That's all you're trying to do is just getting it back into their court, but then they take advantage of you and just try and keep making you run circles and
you're exhausted, and your resources, whether it's your energy or whatever, get depleted.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much, Sheri, for joining us today. And, we're just going to sign off here. Really, really, I'm so grateful for your time. Carter and I both are. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the Revolution Dentistry podcast. If you're finding value here, make sure to hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode. We're here every week to help you grow. We'll see you next time.